future readiness, future preparedness, future fitness, future benchmarking, future maturity, future readiness maturity. So you can just start to imagine the kind of landscape we're talking about, which I'm sure all of you have seen as well. Sometimes it's a score, sometimes it's an index, sometimes it is an assessment, sometimes it's a tool, and sometimes it's a framework. It is created, distributed, used by organizations, private sector organizations. Academics have been working around models for future readiness. Governments as well are doing the same. And from a theoretical perspective, while the literature is very light, it does come from a resource-based view in the sense that organizations are future ready if they are able to not only have the right resources for the future, but also how do we dynamically manage these resources and sense and respond to anything that comes our way and adapt accordingly. So as I said, we're trying to make it an engaging session. Feel free to ask any question that comes to mind later on. And hopefully, we'll try to answer the magic question of which tool for future readiness. So I'm going to start out with Dr. René. What does future readiness mean to you? What is your story in respect to future readiness? And why should people think about future readiness for their organizations?
All right, thanks. Very interesting question, and I think it's also one which I would love to throw back a bit at the audience. Right? Are you thinking that you personally or you as an organization are future ready? Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise arms right now, but it is a good question, right? What is future readiness? And I think we'll explore that there's multifacets to this concept. But I always start with, why do I even care to be future ready? And my personal story was that my CIO at the time at Deutsche Telekom asked me, what are the good ways to be systematic, successful, and repeatedly capable of finding new businesses? And that was at that time very important because we were the monopolist telecommunication operator, so our market could only grow in one direction, and that is getting smaller. And there was a lot of turmoil in that industry because it was not only the telecommunication operators who own the market, it was also then the new tech companies coming in, much of the profit migrating towards services. So we had to rethink our business model. So future readiness for me is often then anchored still in this opportunity discovery. But it's very important that when we talk about future readiness, and then later on also about tools and models, that we start with the why question. Why do I have that? And then I think we're also going to unpack a bit what is a tool, what is a capability. But for me, that was my first mission.
Yeah, so it's the why. And Dr. Hazza, what does future readiness mean to you? Your relationship with the future readiness?
It's first, I would like to thank you for this session. Honestly, I would like to thank the Future Foundation for their invitation. If we look at the future readiness, I'm just going to make a little comparison for you to understand. So if we look at the private sector, for example, the private sector's companies innovate to attract customers. And if one brand, for example, launch a new high-tech product, and if the customer really is not comfortable or is not ready to use it, they will definitely switch to another provider, and the market will adjust itself, and the impact will be limited to this specific company. Wherein in the government we don't have this privilege. So in the government, if we come up with a new digital services or an AI-enabled platform or a future-ready policy, everyone within the society should understand it, trust it, and use it. So the company, the people and the society, they don't have the choice to change government at the end of the day. So this means the government carries really a far bigger role, more than they just to innovate for their own efficiency. They carry the responsibility of really prepare the whole society to be future ready. So it's our role in the government, if you talk about what's the role of government today, it's our role is to educate, it's to raise awareness and make sure that nobody is left behind. So all communities, we're talking about elderly people, youth, businesses, all community, we should really work to educate them, to raise the knowledge about what the future readiness mean for them.
So there is the private sector view, which is the why and what does it mean for your stakeholder at the end of the day, and then there's that societal component where future readiness from a government standpoint is about preparing society for the future.
مسؤولية الحكومة في أن تجهز المستقبل المجتمع من أجل أن يكون جاهز للمستقبل. فنحن في 2022 و 23 عملنا للجاهزية المستقبلية وأخذنا منظور القدرات والموارد الحكومة وأن تكون كل مؤسسات الحكومة إن كانت جاهزة للمستقبل فإن الحكومة ستكون جاهزة ودبي كلها ستكون جاهزة للمستقبل.
And I'll use that to kind of edge into question two. In my mind, future readiness is the soul of the organization. Future readiness is about the culture of the organization and how an organization responds to what comes its way. So sometimes you could be as ready as you are from a policy standpoint, from a procedural standpoint, from authority matrices, etc. But at the end, if something comes your way, how is the organization going to respond? Is everyone going to work together around it? Are they going to be prepared for it from a technological perspective? Do they have even the financial means to deal with something that comes their way? It's part crisis preparedness, but also part in taking the long view.
بل لأن تكون جاهز
للمستقبل. أنتم في دوركم في دراسة هيئات القطاع الخاص أن تنفقوا في كلية أو جامعة التجارة تعملون على هذا الأمر. ما هي تجربتكم وما هي الأزمات أو الأمور السهلة وما هي الأمور التي يمكن تجاوزها وأين هي القيمة ومن وجهة منظور داخلي عندما تنظرون إلى المؤسسات المختلفة ماذا جاهزيتها للمستقبل؟ هل هناك قطاعات أكثر جاهزية
لسواها؟ Very interesting question. I think we first need to unpack what we actually measure. So what journey I got on after this request from my Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer to say, okay, how can we be systematic about finding new businesses? I went actually into a lot of benchmarking work, a lot of case study work, understanding how does a Siemens do that, how does a General Electric do that, how does
ذلك من خلال سيمنز وجنرال إلكتريك وغيرها من الشركات لنتمكن من إيجاد نموذج ناضج بكل أبعاده والنموذج يكون مقارن القدرات المختلفة مع البيئة الخارجية وبطموح المؤسسة المعنية لأن الشركة ربما طموحها أن تكون تابعا أم مجرد جهة ريادية ونحن ندرس أيضا القدرات الفردية ونقيسها وربما لا يكون مفاجئا لكم اليوم في كثير من المؤسسات لديها البيانات والمعلومات وتتجنب الأزمات نعرف هذا على أنه الجزء الإجراءاتي وألا تكون هناك نقاط مخفية في مؤسساتنا وتشكل لنا أزمة لاحقا. معظم المؤسسات لديها تحد في أن يكون لديها تفاهم مشترك للمستقبل ولتحسس معطيات المستقبل وأن تكون لديها قدرات في أن تتخذ قرارات مستقبلية ومن ثم النظر إلى الخلف لمعرفة تحديد السبيل للوصول إلى ذلك المستقبل المستقبل، وأن تكون المؤسسات قادرة على الوقوف معا لتكون قوية في تفكيرها وفي الإجراءات التي تتخذها. هذا أمر علينا أن نناقشه بشكل جلي، وهي دعوة لكم جميعا بأن تفكروا في كيف يتم هذا من خلال مؤسساتكم. بناء على هذا الأمر، هل هي مسألة داخلية فقط داخل المؤسسة، وكيف تتعاملون مع من هم من خارج المؤسسة، وهل هناك أداة مركزية أم هي موزعة؟ الإجابة المباشرة لأي أكاديمي يقول لك الأمر يعتمد. المؤسسات التي تصل إلى نضج عال فهي لديها القوة الداخلية، مثل شركة بوش المعروفة بأدواتها القوية، وهي الأكبر في قطاع السيارات البوش، وما يقومون به لديهم مستشارين وخبراء خارجيين يحملون البيانات ويجلبونه إلى داخل المؤسسة. وهناك أمر آخر، وهي ألا يطلع المنافسين على استراتيجيتك. وفي وقتنا الحاضر أيضا هناك مسألة مهمة، وهي مدى فرادة استراتيجياتنا، وأن نكون متفردين في إجراءاتنا داخل المؤسسة، كما أن يكون نحن في عالم فيه تشبيك عالي المستوى، وبالتالي كيف نتواصل مع المعنيين وندعوهم ليحددوا الأولويات معنا لنرسم الأنظمة البيئية في هذا القطاع.
قبل أن أنتقل إلى الدكتور هزا، هل هناك قطاعات أكثر استعدادا من القطاعات الأخرى؟ هناك قطاعات كانت أكثر استقرارا في الماضي، مثلا قطاع السيارات. هناك مجموعة كبيرة من العلامات التجارية، فأنا كنت أعمل في هذا القطاع وكنا قادرين على توقف
marginal error of maybe 3 to 5%. You will not be surprised to learn that this is no longer the case. Electric cars have lowered dramatically the barriers of entry into that industry. And also supply chains are shifting quite rapidly, which was a main source of stability in the past. So these type of industries, they have a lot of catching up to do. They might have had already foresight towards the customer, but maybe not on the structure of the industry, and they are often left unprepared. And there's other industries which have always been based on foreseeing what comes their way, fast-moving consumer good companies, also the tourism sector. They're often very well prepared on average, and then it depends, of course, also on organization to organization.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Over to the public sector. What has been your experience in assessing government entities? Because that sits within the Dubai Government Excellence Program.
Yes.
You run a part of it on Future Readiness Index and the Future Readiness Index of Dubai Government Entities. Your experience in carrying that out, the process itself, any bottlenecks, anything that went smoothly, and then what is your insight on, again, public sector organizations and their future readiness and what value that brings?
It's one of our greatest strengths, actually, it's building trust. The government building trust with the assessment body for the last 27, 30 years, And having this trust, we've been assessing the government since 1997. And the government really trusts the system of the assessment, and they believe in that what this system and what this assessment will bring to them. They believe that the assessment will really, help them to innovate, help them to growth. So one of the really things went well, that the entity being able to quickly adapt the new Dubai Future Readiness Index, actually. So this is one of the fast learning, and the entity being really well prepared for it for the past 2 decades. Another interesting things we've noticed in the last few years applying the Future Readiness Index in cooperation with the Dubai Future Foundation is actually we've noticed that the government officials, the employees, and everyone in the government, the conversations start changing from how well we achieved in the past. Now they start changing the question, how well we prepared for the future. So this is a significant change by not just looking at what you have achieved in the past, but now they start looking on how well we prepared for the future. And this is very interesting mind shift within the government. And we really appreciate that within the government entities. Bottlenecks, I won't call it bottlenecks, but there's always challenges when you assess any organization, and I believe that apply to the government and non-government. One of the major things, I think the adoption and the focus more on technologies and AI, wherein forgetting somehow the human aspect and the human side. And we're talking about, we were talking before the session, if you focus more on the AI, you forget one of the main aspects, which is the human. When I talk about human here, I talk about the culture, the reskilling, the upskilling, the organization agility itself. Are they ready are they prepared for what next? So sometimes the government entities or the organization, they come up with a really big invention or technology, and the capacity and the capabilities are not able to really move forward or transform and use this technology. But this is, take times. Another challenge is maybe from our side as well is to make a consistent understanding of the Dubai Future Readiness Index. And this is really important because we're dealing with different government entities, different in size, different in mandates and maturity. So how they apply this index within their organization, it's a mutual responsibility. Maybe it's on us as well to have a clear guidance to the entities on how they apply it to what's really fit their context. So I think work in progress. It was very interesting results for the last assessment, and we have the coming assessment in 2026, and hopefully there will be improvement within the government as well.
I want to touch upon the point about we need to raise awareness or bring additional understanding as to what the Future Readiness Index is to the government entities who you're assessing. Which is, again, a reflection of the nature of the Dubai Government Excellence Program and how you're bringing this idea of future readiness to government entities. So it's like a top-down as opposed to coming to EDHEC Business School and saying, I'd like to run a future fit assessment, right? So awareness is quite important. Do you feel that this is something that needs time before you start assessing them for readiness? Like, do you give them time to understand this model and then try to improve themselves before you actually do the first assessment? Sorry, and this question is primarily for those who are in government and have not yet launched something like we have in the Future Readiness Index.
Yeah. The idea of future readiness is actually come up in a collaboration between the Executive Council of Dubai Government and Dubai Future Foundation. And whatever we do, not just the future readiness, we always make sure that the government are really well aware of this concept or this project. So when we talked about Future Readiness Index, we assist the government. We have many awareness sessions, but the outcome of this assessment, we share it with Dubai Future Foundation for the Dubai Future Foundation to look into new solution with the government entity. So this is how we really deal with the government. We definitely, the leadership in Dubai, actually 2 years ago, they announced this, Hazza Alnuaimi in the World Government Summit, they announced the Future Index. And the idea is to move from, as I mentioned, from measuring what we used to be good at to how we can be good for the future. And the message was clear. We all should be ready for the future and for what's next, and we always to be ahead of the game and ahead of the curve when it comes to government services and government work. Yeah.
So from our perspective, because you mentioned that, you share some of the information with us, and then we're also privy of what the private sector organizations are doing, and we kind of look, around the world as to how future readiness is being sought and how people view it. And what we have seen is, again, it echoes what I said in the beginning. There's a lot of different models on future readiness. And so there's a little bit of confusion as to which way to take. But what we've also noticed is the focus on tech foresight.
Exactly.
and preparing for technological breakthroughs. And yes, it is important, but with it comes, but are we prepared for the non-technological breakthroughs as well? There are other breakthroughs, whether it's through business models or whether it's through all these disruptions in supply chain is not technological, right? It's beyond that as well. And the biggest challenge that we found across the board is that even for those who do carry out future readiness assessments, the question is, what value does it add to their stakeholder? So they go back to their board, or they go back to their leadership, or they go back to their management and say, we've done a future readiness assessment, we've looked at our organization, we are future ready. And what? So what does that mean? Why should a stakeholder bother, again, spending effort, time, resources in order to be future ready? So, so bridging that translation between a future readiness assessment and on-the-ground value to your stakeholder happens to be the biggest challenge. Do you find that as well in government?
Absolutely. Then maybe here I will focus on what we really focus on the Future Readiness Index is the preparedness. So how the organization are really well prepared for what's coming, and the fitness, and maybe you will touch on that. How fit we are if the change happens. So if any transformation happens. So it's actually our model, and going back to not only focusing on technology. So we focus on building capabilities, we focus on the culture, we focus on leadership. So many aspects, but the main two aspects, when you planning to assess your organization readiness or future readiness, is how well you prepared for what's coming and how fit you are internally in terms of capabilities, in terms of systems, in terms of organization agility and so on.
And René, from your end?
I think your question also invites to ask the opposite question. Can we live, or some of us, live without being future ready? And my own thinking was challenged in a project which I really liked. It was a project where the chairman of a large conglomerate asked us to assess his top 20 companies and their future fitness. So we did that. It was done on the top management level. We assessed everything, put it into our model. Our model is quite harsh in the sense that you can either be vigilant, which would be the desired state, you can be vulnerable, or you can be in danger, so that you have quite high shortcomings. You can also be hyper-vigilant. If you actually do too much, then you necessarily have to, because you're in a very stable environment, for example. And I'm sitting in this room presenting these results to C-level representatives of these different companies. And there's one company in this room which is perceived, based on business excellence, based on their performance, based on their profitability, as the poster child. Showing my results, and the poster child is in danger. You imagine the room goes silent. Everyone thinks, okay, this nice little professor from France will take his bag and leave very quickly. Door was blocked, so I couldn't. I had to stay.
Yeah.
So eventually the CFO stands up and says, okay, well, everyone is looking at me, so I might as well say something about that. So we come out in this assessment, which we all done as not so good. Now the question is, should we care? My answer would have been yes. His argument was, well, we're actually operating a business model which has proven itself not only to be resilient over time, but also resilient against others who try to copy this. We have a fantastic profitability, we're growing. So there's no need for this deeper reflection about what's the limits of my business model. And I found that very interesting. I would wonder if that is a good enough answer for an investor who says, well, my money should stay with you for some time, not just for the next year. So eventually, you probably need to build this muscle. And I think this is where we're moving closer to this value creation. We have the chance that we have been doing these benchmarking studies for a very long time, so that allows us also to look at longitudinal data. And in this longitudinal data, we see as a strongest indicator that the vigilant companies, they outgrow their competitors with a growth 3 times as fast. And that is not surprising because future readiness means you have a narrative for the future, and that narrative is what brings energy, what brings investment, what brings also stakeholders around the table you need to work with in order to grow. And I think we kind of pitched here with this private and public sector. What I'm also reflecting is we're probably representing also old Europe and the new world, which is by definition more future-oriented, more future-interested, more in potential, while in Europe we often fear, well, we have a lot to lose, so let's be careful. And maybe just to spice this up a little bit, I've got one slide which I use now regularly, where I'm putting on the same page the global risk report of the World Economic Forum and the global opportunity report from the Future Foundation here. I find that always hilarious to see, okay, what would interest you more? And I'm asking this to my students. And many of my students, they would pick the risk report.
So future readiness is about preparing, but it's also a narrative for both public sector and private sector for the key users or customers or society as well. That's a powerful one. So we came here today to talk about, well, which tool? So we've covered the pre, now we need to cover the second half of the question, which is which tool? So I think, how many of you here would identify yourself as part of the public sector? Okay. And how many of you would identify themselves as part of academia? And how many of you are part of the private sector but business-oriented as opposed to your own or consultancy and professional services? Private sector and consultancy? So we actually have an interesting blend. So we have an interesting mix. I would say, give or take, almost equal proportions. So how do they decide which tool, if they haven't yet taken a try at it? And even if they have, should they explore other tools as well, or models, or indices? We need to come up with some agreement what to call them. But I'll start with Dr. Hazza first.
Sure. When it comes to choosing which model, to be honest, of future readiness, is the most important question you should ask yourself is not to assess for the sake of assessment. You really need to look at the model. It's like you're choosing a university. So you don't choose the university by the name. You look at the curriculum of this university, what exactly you want to. So one of the major things I would advise is to look at, again, the preparedness and the fitness. Does any model have these pillars in it? So for example, in our future readiness in Dubai, we have these two, and we have other pillars as well. So this is really, really important. And how they measure the scores and the results, and what methodology do they use? This is really a good question. And who applied this model? And when it comes to Dubai, it's been applied by leading and elite entities within Dubai. So this is a very good question when you look at the different models of future readiness. And I invite you all to go through Dubai Future Readiness Index. It's been proven. It's been actually reviewed by international experts. And what's interesting we have in our model as well is not only assessed by an assessor or subject matter expert, it's also, we have an opinion of the entity's employees' feedback and perspective. So it's a balance between an assessment and an opinion of the employees. So if the employees say we have future ready organization and the assessor come and say they're not ready, so it's really good match and a good balance between the two. So we really need to look at a holistic view when we look at the future assessment index. Yeah.
So the reputation of the organization or entity or researcher or academic side that has actually come up with a model, whether or not it includes both preparedness and fitness. How grounded the methodology is, because again, research quality comes into play in that sense. It sounds like it needs to have a mix of methods as well, qualitative, quantitative, subjective, objective. And if you've got subjective information, how do you validate it? And if there's a way to validate it as well. So it's quite grounded. So again, it's interesting because I'm thinking now, if I go back to the 14 or so, that's just a quick scan. The 14 or so different models, I mean, how many of them would tick all those boxes?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. René, which tool, what should they use and choose?
So I think what we need to understand first is that any tool is only as good as the underlying model. And when we make a model choice, which should be actually the choice, so not how easy a tool maybe is able to, how easy it is to use it, but what's the underlying model, then we always make a model choice. Now I'm old enough to still have been, or have memories from being in school, where when we talk about geography, that there's actual physical maps being rolled out. I don't know if anyone still has that joy. I was actually carrying these thick things, and then they get rolled out. And they show different things. There's maps with streets, there's maps with what kind of industries do we have in different regions, where are the refineries, you have maps about the topography, etc. And these are all different models which serve different purposes. Now, we made the choice of saying our future fitness is a model which helps shape behavior. Behavior of leaders, behavior also of everyone in the organization. That was for us always key. And we have now, with our model, been lucky to have applied it for a very long time. So we also know what are even the outcomes of the behaviors. But for sure, you need to have a model where you say, then it becomes actionable after I've done my assessment. And that often also points towards, it's good to have a model which you can connect to good practices. So in our case, we have good practices on the overall model, so which organizations are future fit and fitter than others. And also on the capability level, so that I can also pick and choose, well, what are the capabilities which make me stronger? So think model and think how is this shaping then actual decision making and behavior. And what I like also about this fitness, I mean, we both like sports a lot, is that you have the dimensions, you know what to do, but it should also be fine-grained enough that you can year by year check that I do well in how I organize my training, do I do well in how I organize my nutrition, etc. That is something which you want to do then probably every year for future fitness so that you see progress.
At the same time, let's say we tick all those boxes that Dr. Hazza mentioned, and we choose the right methodology that shapes behaviors and informs our decision makers. If we end up with a handful, let's say, I think if someone has to choose, I'm just wondering if maybe it's a good reflectionary exercise to reflect on the handful. And not only that, just to think about, with this handful, what does it mean to my context, and how do I look like in this respect and that respect and the other respect? So I'm just wondering if there is also a benefit of looking at the handful as well.
I think so. I mean, every model brings its value. Of course, if in theory you have 100 models, you all overlay them, well, then you have reality. But then reality is very complex and you don't know what to decide. So every model is trying to be very sharp with informing the decisions and then the behavior you're taking. If you're taking a street map, well, all you care about is probably where are the streets which I can drive with my car on, and increasingly you get even the information where there's a traffic jam and where there's no traffic jam. Maybe topography matters for you, whether I'm going to go up. If we're cycling, yes, it does matter for us. It's good that you have that in your planning. Not every street map is showing that, so you can be quite surprised. So in that way, yes, it's often interesting to overlay for different purposes also different models and then also apply different tools.
Any thoughts on that, Dr. Hazza?
I was thinking, when we look at the model, so for example, when we talk about excellence, I shift to excellence just for you to understand the point out of what's harmful when you look at a model. So we built our own model after using the FQM model, for example, and another Malcolm Baldrige model for years when it comes to excellence. But we come up in the UAE with an excellence model that fit our scope of work. So it's been designed on how the government is working. So this is really important to know exactly what fit, again, you and what does not fit you. So we create the model that somehow it's designed for how the UAE government and Dubai is working. So we have center governments, we have authority, we have service providers. So we cater all of these needs into our model. So it's very important to look at what this model really will help me. Not just I'm going to use any model. So, and does it really reflect all the aspects of the organization as well?
Very interesting. So I'm going to switch a little bit to the elephant in the room, which is AI. Because, the landscape of future readiness, index score, model, preparedness, etc. Guess what? Same thing is happening on AI. AI readiness, AI index, AI framework, AI maturity. I'm sure all of you have been exposed to that. So we asked you a question earlier as to whether you think AI readiness is basically future readiness. So if you're AI ready, are you future ready? So one such report that was published recently from Cisco carried out some research with over 8,000 companies who have 500 employees or more. They found, over 80% of them have high ambition, but under 48% of them have the infrastructure for AI in terms of AI readiness. The creme de la creme, the top pace setters, I think they were calling them, they were 98% ready for AI from an infrastructure and security perspective. So just asking this interesting question, does AI readiness mean I'm future ready? And in theory, what that means, if I forgo all the future readiness tools and say, you know what, I don't care about any of them, I'm just going to take AI readiness, going to outsource it, bring in a company to come in, which we didn't touch upon, by the way, maybe we should. Do you bring external parties to come and assess your organization, or do you do it internally? So let's say I'm going to invite someone externally to come in, assess my organization for AI readiness and say, there, I'm AI ready, therefore I am future ready.
We both disagree with you.
Okay.
Right? That was the answer. The AI is a massive and disruptive tools, and definitely every single organization should use the AI. But again, we look at the AI as part of all emerging technology. So you don't just look at AI and forget all emerging technology. And we've seen this, trends that comes and fall by times. But we know AI is here to stay for long. But definitely, AI itself is not. You cannot judge an entity by just if it's an AI ready. 100%. You have to have, the right resources, the right capabilities, the right environment to use it. Your communication with your stakeholders. If you have a wonderful AI tools and nobody uses it, it's actually useless, right? Yeah. So AI is important again, but if an entity, whatever is the entity, maybe the entity is in the tech environment. In automobile environment, they should be maybe a little bit advanced in that area. But when we look at the government, we look at it differently. AI is important, and it's a major tool, and it's a country direction now. But again, it's not the main indication that you are future ready, 100%.
And technology readiness is already within your
It is in the future. Exactly. For example, in Dubai Future Readiness Index, we have sensing, monitoring, applying, all emerging technology, including AI. So this is how we look at the technology, not just an AI, and you have to be AI. Yeah. And it's very risky as well to just focus on AI, and you jump to the conclusion without going through all the process of applying the future readiness itself.
But theoretically, you could also make it part of your narrative. So theoretically, if I say I'm a future-ready organization and I run an AI readiness assessment, and that emerges to be, yes, you are AI ready, then it's almost validating the fact that I am future ready.
It's how do you use the word, At the end of the day, it's a media things, People use different marketing just to show that they're really good in what they do, but we know, we've been there, we assess the organization, we know the nitty-gritty details when it comes to how the organization are excel or ready for the future. But definitely your argument is right as well. We have a say in Arabic, Allah ma yisma' min sakit. So you always have to promote yourself. So it's very important as well to talk about your readiness of AI, since it's the trend as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. René, just before we give the audience a chance to ask questions.
Yeah, for me, it's very clear. I mean, AI is a fantastic tool to amplify your thinking, but not to replace it. You need to still hold firm the agency. And what is the big risk, I think, is that we apply AI tools, we get maybe also recommendations on what to do in the future, and we fail to achieve two things, and that is leadership unity around what is the direction we want to give our organizations, and also the connection with the why. And these two combined can be extremely toxic and bring the system as we have built it to a halt, because once we delegate power to somebody higher up in the organization, we believe that we're not only delegating the decision, but also the capacity to control the reasoning behind. And that is something which we will all need to be very careful about, how to amplify using AI without losing control and without losing the mandate which was given to us as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to open again the floor for any questions anyone might have for us and for Dr. Hazza and Dr. René. There's a question there. Please raise your hand high because I can't really see. Yeah, and up there. There's also a lady, the lady in the green jacket as well. Yeah.
Thanks
Please
for
go
the
ahead.
interesting sessions. I have a few questions. The first of them is
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay. To what extent generative AI is deployed in measuring the future readiness index? And what's the model used to assess the return and relevance to measuring that index? And how is it influenced by any resilience that may arise? And my next question...
I think you need to bring it very close.
We really don't, it's not clear yet.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll ask my question. To what extent generative AI is deployed in measuring the future readiness index? And what's the model used to assess the return and relevance to measuring that index?
Okay, so I think the question is to what extent does Gen AI help us imagine the future?
To what extent generative AI is used to measure the future readiness index?
To what extent does Gen AI is used to measure future readiness?
I mentioned, future readiness. We have a model of future readiness, different pillars in this model. Generative, you mean generative AI, right? We're actually using a subject matter expert on the public or employees' perspective to measure the index. We didn't touch upon the generative AI. It's part of the pillars of the model itself. As I mentioned, we talked about how to sense, monitor, and apply AI within your organization. But us using generative AI to assess, we're there when it comes to excellence. So in our model, in excellence now, we are using 7 AI use cases on how we can assess government excellence. We are testing it, and we're going to apply it next year. But part of the model, of the future readiness model, we don't have the generative AI so far.
There's a question for the lady in green.
Thank you, and thank you for the interesting panel. My question is maybe more a philosophical question, but we talk a lot about readiness, future-proof, and for me it feels like that's sort of, it gives us a reason to assess, but then it's like you gain it and then you're done. So I actually want to challenge maybe and ask you, is it the right word still? Because it says it's A to Z and then you're done. And what I feel is we often focus on things that we can measure. And I believe that mindset is a huge part of becoming future fluent, as I like to call it, because then you're never done. And how do we make sure that these super important parts of becoming future fluent or whatever word we might come up with together can be taken into consideration, because they might not be measurable, but I feel definitely in a world where I think and also hope that humanity will become way more important than AI, we make sure that we prepare people to be mindful about the future, so the mindset, and how can we measure that part of becoming whatever it takes to be ready or fluent or whatever word we might come up with together for the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I think that's why I had mentioned in the beginning, there's preparedness, there's fitness, there's readiness. You're absolutely right. Maybe it's something to think about. It's interesting you mentioned fluent, future fluent. So I will let my panelists answer that question. Can we start with the end one, though? It's the mindset, right?
Can you repeat just a few?
Yes.
Short it for me, because
so
I didn't get it, to be honest.
She's basically asking in terms of, we call it future readiness, future fitness, all these different words, but maybe it's something else, because it is beyond just, I'll bring in the example that she brought up, which is the future hopefully is human. So how do we build something that is inclusive of that? And then how do you bring that through to others and to society and think about, future fluency and future mindsets, future ready mindsets, if I want to call it.
I think that in the government, one of the main aspects we consider is engaging the peoples, either within the organization or with your stakeholder, or with your customer. Engagement is one of the main part of maybe thinking about your future, because you're not designing the surfaces, or you're not designing the future for your own. You design it for the whole society. So I think, if I'm right, maybe we have a conversation after this session. I think engagement is a main part of really engaging everybody to involve in the future readiness.
René?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Also because what we should not forget is future fitness of an organization will always be a team sport. So just because René or somebody else makes a model and I'm measuring something doesn't mean that necessarily the entire chain from perceiving towards prospecting as an organization towards taking the right decisions is functioning. So when we measure fitness, or we do reflect whether our nutrition is good, whether our training up is good, but we also need to see whether we get first through the finishing line or whether we in the end take the right decisions. So that's very crucial. And that's kind of how we then also build our model, that the value of future preparedness is always reflected by the weakest link in your chain or the weakest capability. That is crucial. And that, however, is also a great rallying cry, or it's a great mission which you then can carry together as an organization, closing those gaps you have in forward-oriented decision-making and acting.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time for other questions, unless it can be like the gentleman up there, just 30 seconds, make it very short. But I just want to say before we get there, outsourcing readiness, inviting someone to...
It's very important to, as I mentioned, to assess yourself, of course, and to look from this different perspective. It's good to have an international point of view when you assess your readiness as well. So yes, outsourcing is yes.
30 seconds.
Thank you for the interesting panel. I'm interested to know if some organizations are too slow in adopting or to adapt with the new policy, new technology. So is it possible for them to be ready for the future by skipping some steps? What would be the best way? Like usually bigger organizations are slower. What's the best strategy for this? Thank you.
I'll let René capture that.
Okay.
So what we emphasize is that what makes also fast response team, emergency response teams, firefighters and so on respond fast is that they have rehearsed the future. So foresight always delivers also a playbook that you already have pre-thought what to do. Because what is slow is if you first need to interpret together, if you then need to come up with decisions together and then start enacting them. But if you have already pre-thought, what do we do as an automobile company when autonomous driving is becoming the norm, well, then you actually know what to do, and you might have already done some of the steps before, the capability build-up, etc. So that's something which I think for many organizations does not come naturally, but building this playbook and rehearsing the future is key.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day and tomorrow.